Hello, everyone. How are y'all doing? My name is Ezra, or you can call me E-Soup, and I just wanted to remind everyone that this book contains mature subject matter. There is a link to trigger warnings in the description. If you didn't already know this at this point, if you were just dropping in randomly in the middle for some reason, um, please give a like to the stream and please subscribe if you like what I do here. Um, and yeah, we're finishing volume 1 of Ballad of Sword and Wine today, and I am so excited to see how this volume ends. Hi everybody. Good to see you all here. I'm glad you could make it today, Lonjade. I'm glad to hear your internet came back in time. Um, Hi Blue, Henry. Hi Nina, hi Cookie. Yeah, I I don't have lemonade from Mike today. I don't like Brittany does. I don't have any kind of alcoholic beverage. I know that we were talking about in Discord like celebrating the end of the first volume with something. But in lieu of that, I'm just drinking some tea. I am drinking tea in my favorite ridiculous mug. I'm just gonna call this one the frog mug. You might have seen this before from the U streams at some point, but yeah. Yes, Henry, I'm gonna just start making Mike's lemonade like be a thing now. It's gonna happen. Um, Henry, what is Hounds of Sisyphus? That sounds very cool. Um, I was uh I was having an internet moment earlier and I'm hoping it's going to obey now that the stream is going. Everything was fine. I tested the connection, and then it was like randomly disconnecting me for a second, but I refreshed everything, and it's fine. And I really need it to behave, because, like, this is important. This is more important than whatever issues the internet feels like having. um, oh, Henry, it's a BL and horror manhwa. That definitely sounds interesting to me. I really need to read more manhwa. Um, I need to get on that train. So, we left off on like what I would call like kind of a low-key cliffhanger last time. And I am so curious to see where we go from there. Um, where we left off. I'm just gonna read the last little tiny bit of the previous chapter just to like remind us what was going on. Um what's all that enigmatic stuff about dead men's bones? Ghost stories don't scare me. He paused for a moment. Since you touched me earlier, it's only fair that I touch you back. We aren't on such good terms that I can just let it go. So, where do I touch? And that was Xiao Chuye speaking. Um, so I've been honestly going nuts, just like waiting for today. But we are on page 365 for chapter 36, which is called Scent. I was saying this before, but I love these chapter titles. Shen Zichuan mimicked Xiao Chuye's move from before and splashed water all over his face, then seized the chance to grab the clothes. Hi, Anna. Eyes closed from the spray, Xiao Chuye reached toward the clothing rack and pulled off a dry cloth. He draped it over Shen Zichuan's head and rubbed aggressively. Shen Zichuan was still putting on his clothes, but Xiao Chuye's motions sent half his body swaying. Seething with contempt, Shen Zichuan used his bare foot to kick out at the chair. Just as the seat under Xiao Chuye slid back across the floor, Xiao Chuye clamped his legs tightly around Shen Zichuan and dragged the other man toward him. Then he continued to dry Shen Zichuan's hair as though he were toweling down a puppy. This reminds me of another Danmei novel. I won't say which one it is, but if you know, you know. The hair drying, towel drying part, that is. If that's the way it is, I'll do as I please, Xiao Chuye snapped. As you son of a, Shen Zichuan's words fragmented under the rough treatment. Xiao Chuye pulled the cloth off, and without another word, pinched Shen Zichuan's chin with one hand, while sliding the other from the nape of Shen Zichuan's neck down to his lower back. Son of a bitch, Xiao Chuye said. You called me a son of a bitch? Shen Zichuan hadn't had a chance to tie his belt properly, and Xiao Chuye's old clothes hung loosely on his body, exposing his collarbones. The lingering water on his skin soaked through the cloth and dampened Xiao Chuye's fingertips, the sensation melding with that satiny touch. I didn't. Shen Zichuan reached back and grabbed Xiao Chuye's hand to hold it in place. They say one should reflect daily on one's faults. That's some good reflecting, our Gongzi. You don't understand. Xiao Chuye's nimble fingers twisted to grasp Shen Zichuan's hand instead. The first phrase I ever learned was son of a bitch. Everyone knows your R. Gongzi is a scoundrel. That's not something I need to reflect on. This waist of yours is far too slender, isn't it? To your inexperienced hands, maybe, Shen Zichuan said callously. You're right. Xiao Chuye pretended not to understand. I haven't touched your waist many times. Shen Zichuan had no desire to continue this charade. He tightened his belt with one hand and said, Since you've touched me, we're even, and that's that. Xiao Chuye withdrew the legs he'd wrapped around Shen Zichuan, and Shen Zichuan fastened his belt properly. His face had gone red from the haphazard toweling Xiao Chuye had foisted on him. Is that why his face was red? Feeling the heat, Xiao Chuye rose and picked up the Eastern Pearl from the ground, whereupon he caught sight of Shen Zichuan's bare legs again. After a brief daze, he swiftly straightened and took 2 steps back, then reconsidered and took another 2 steps forward. Sleep. Shen Zichuan sat and drank a bowl of hot ginger soup to counteract the cold. After rinsing his mouth, he sneezed again. The way he sneezed amused Xiao Chuye. He thought it resembled a cat. Soaking his handkerchief in cold water, Xiao Chuye wiped his own face clean. Don't go anywhere. Xiao Chuye undressed and pointed. You're sleeping in my bed. Shen Zichuan wiped his mouth. Your wish is my command. Dispensing with formalities, he sat down on Xiao Chuye's bed. Xiao Chuye moved tables and chairs before dragging the settee to the vacated spot next to the bed, only a stool's width from Shen Zichuan. He rolled onto it, folded his arms beneath his head, and said, Lights out, Lanzhou. Shen Zichuan blew out the candle and lay down under the covers with his back to Xiao Chuye. It was still snowing outside, but the room was quiet and warm. Xiao Chuye shut his eyes, preparing to sleep. The feeling of Shen Zichuan's body lingered on his fingertips, more vivid in the darkness. Xiao Chuye opened his eyes, stared at the ceiling, and thought resolutely of the blue skies of Li Bei. Only without desire could one become a sage. His Shifu had taught him to hold a bow at a time of year when the pastures of Li Bei were luxuriant. Xiao Chuye had sat on the fence at the edge of the paddock, resting his chin in his hand and gazing up at the cerulean sky. "What are you thinking about?" Zuo Qianqiu had asked him. Hanging around Xiao Chuye's neck was a bone thumb ring. He swung his stubby legs and said, "I want a falcon, Shifu. I want to fly." Zuo Qianqiu joined him on the fence and looked at him. He patted the back of the boy's head and said, "You are a child filled with desires, but in this world, it is only one without desire who can become a sage. There are many things that will become your cage if you desire them." Oof. Blue, I guess he'll never become a sage then. Well. Restless, the young Xiao Chuye grabbed the fence with both hands and hung upside down from it, his little robe covering his face in a cloud of grass and dust. "It's human nature to want," he said. "Wanting is prelude to both joy and misery." Zuo Qianqiu polished the great bow in his arms with care. "If you acknowledge your desires, you will be obsessed with gains and losses. If you want something, you must have it. That is your nature, little wolf pup. But yeah, there will be many things in the future that you want but can never have. What will you do then?" Xiao Chuye landed on the grass. He grabbed the hem of his robe and caught a large grasshopper. Picking up the struggling insect between his fingers, he said distractedly, "My father said, where there is a will, there is a way. There's nothing that can't be obtained." Zuo Qianqiu sighed. The child was still too young after all. Resigned, he pointed up at the sky and said, "All right, you say you want to fly, but can you really?" Releasing the grasshopper, Xiao Chuye craned his neck to look up at Zuo Qianqiu, saying in all seriousness, "I can learn to tame falcons. Once I tame one, his wings will belong to me. Wherever he flies, I will have flown there too. A man has to adapt, Shifu." Zuo Qianqiu looked at him for a long time. "Then you are stronger than me. I'm a fool who cannot adapt." Imitating a falcon, Xiao Chuye spread his arms wide against the wind and went running into the field. "I want to tame horses, too." "Falcons and horses are both strong-willed." Zuo Qianqiu walked after him and said, "Looks like our Aya likes whatever is hard to tame." Taming, Xiao Chuye had said then. "I like the process." Xiao Chuye realized now he didn't just like the process. He reveled in it. He was fascinated by it. Just like conditioning a falcon, he kept the falcon awake for 7 days and hungry for 4, depriving it until the feathers on its head puffed, until its gaze was as concentrated as a sesame seed, until it obeyed his commands. Only then would he bring it hunting. And now, this lust was his newly acquired falcon. He tilted his head slightly to study Shen Zichuan's back, where his collar had once again slid down to expose the nape of his neck. In the gloom, it looked like a piece of natural jade, soft and smooth to the touch. Xiao Chuye was hard again. He neither moved nor averted his gaze. He didn't believe something so shallow as lust could dominate him. He didn't believe he would succumb to such base instinct. The next day, before dawn had fully broken, both men sat up in unison as if they had finally had enough. Outside, Ding Tao, who had been lying awake on the roof the whole night, huffed a cloud of white into the chill air and watched maidservants file into the room. Huh. I didn't hear anything last night. Duh, said Gujin. He didn't succeed. Ding Tao, brush and ink already in hand, paused skeptically. How would you know? Gujin shifted his position and watched Shen Zichuan step outside. Look at him. He's moving normally. Other than some dark circles under his eyes, he looks rested enough. The two turned their heads as one to follow Shen Zichuan. Then they looked back at Xiao Chuye as he stepped out. Our Gongzi doesn't look too happy, observed Ding Tao. He's deprived, said Gujin. I can't deal with these two. I know they're doing their job, kind of, but, they're literally just up there, eating popcorn, have they slept together yet? Didn't know young master was a cut sleeve, all that. Chen Yang draped an overcoat around Xiao Chuye. Noting his grave expression, he asked, "Did he spoil your plans, Your Excellency?" "You could say so," Xiao Chuye replied. Their job is to be Fodanshi, dream gig. Yeah, on a Ding Tao and his notebook against the world. He's like, I gotta write this down even if I don't report it. I just need to write it down. Alarmed, Chen Yang said, "Last night he's pretty good at feigning sleep." Xiao Chuye secured Wolf's Fang around his waist and descended the steps into the snow. "Come on, we're going to the drill grounds." Chen Yang caught up to him. "There's no training today, Your Excellency, and with the snow..." Xiao Chuye mounted his horse and said gruffly, "I'm going to see the new gear. Tell Gujin and Ding Tao to keep an eye on him." Chen Yang nodded. Xiao Chuye looked up and shouted at the two on the roof, "If you lose him again, both of you can get lost too." The two heads that popped out from the rooftop nodded once and shrank back again. Great. We've turned from our Gongzi's personal guards into his personal guards. Ding Tao stowed the brush and book carefully back in his lapels. That guy could fight 8 men on his own. We'll just have to keep an eye on him. Gujin shook what was left of his wine. Just keep an eye on him. Ding Tao readied himself and placed both hands neatly on his knees. After sitting a while, he asked, "But where is he?" They looked at each other, then rose at the same time and swore, "Shit." Steamed bun in one hand, Shen Zichuan opened the back door of the Temple of Guilt. Ji Gong was shadowboxing in the courtyard. When he saw Shen Zichuan coming, he wiped his face with the cloth and asked, "What are you doing here?" "I had time today. In a few days, I'll be busy." Grand Mentor Qi was sleeping on a stack of papers inside. His snores rumbled like thunder, so Shen Zichuan and Ji Gong sat under the eaves to chat instead. Still mopping his brow, Ji Gong asked, "You've been keeping up with your training, right?" Shen Zichuan lifted his sleeve to reveal the bruises left behind by his sparring match with Xiao Chuye the day before. "I fought with Xiao R." Stunned, Ji Gong instantly flew into a rage. "He dared to hit you?" "I think he wanted to test my fighting skills." Shen Zichuan shook his sleeve back down. Shifu, he's truly blessed by heaven. His physique is a league above the Prince of Li Bei's. I countered his blows with G-style boxing, but it was as futile as an ant shaking a tree. I couldn't move him at all. Back then, Zuo Qianqiu left the capital and headed to Suotian Pass, where he met Feng Yisheng, Ji Gong said. Feng Yisheng took Zuo Qianqiu in as his adopted son and imparted to him the Feng broadsword. By the time his practice was passed down to Xiao Er, it was probably an amalgamation of various schools of techniques. But the Ji style naturally has its own advantages. If you spar with him using broadswords alone, you'll be able to see the difference. His wolf's fang was forged by a master swordsmith under Grand Marshal Qi. It slices through metal like mud. Common blades are useless against it. The broadswords forged by the Qi clan smiths are all generals' blades, designed for combat on the battlefield. Take Xiao Er's wolf's fang. If he takes it into battle, it'll split human bone with one straight slash. It was designed to make the most of his arm strength. Ji Gong stamped the snow off his shoes as he spoke. As for us, even if we had the opportunity to wield one, such a sword might not be a good fit. But you don't have to worry about your blade. Shifu has already found one for you. A blade for me? Shen Zichuan was taken by surprise. The embroidered uniform guard is a good place. Ji Gong smiled at him. You haven't been there long, but you'll soon see it harbors all the hidden talents of Great Zhou. Qi Juyin might have her acclaimed swordsmith, but we have no lack of them in the embroidered uniform guard either. I've been thinking of that blade Ji Lei has. Once I get it for you and hand it to an old friend to reforge, it will be comparable to Xiao Er's wolf's fang. Isn't Ji Lei's blade a Xiuchun saber? He usually carries a Xiuchun saber, but he also has my father's old blade in his collection, said Ji Gong with a snort. Why isn't he dead yet? Once the Court of Judicial Review sentences him, that blade will be sealed in the palace armory. As long as it's in there, your Shifu will find a way. So I guess he didn't kill him. He just tortured him in a particularly horrible way that we don't get to know exactly. We just know it was bad. He has been tortured for such a long time, Shen Zichuan said softly. He won't hold out much longer. Ji Gong then remembered something else and asked, Did you find the person I asked you to look for before the autumn hunt? I found him. Shen Zichuan smiled. I'm just waiting for him to come out. Xiao Chuye didn't return for dinner, so Shen Zichuan retired to his own room. In the middle of the night, he heard rapid footsteps outside, followed by a knock on his door. Shen Zichuan was about to feign sleep when he heard a sound from the window. Xiao Chuye lifted the wooden pane with his scabbard and whistled at him through the opening. Meng landed on the sill and tilted his head to look inside too. We agreed to sleep together. Xiao Chuye was displeased. What are you doing back here? Shen Zichuan threw a pillow through the window. Xiao Chuye caught it. He had no choice but to get up. Blanket bundled into his arms, he opened the door. Xiao Chuye carried Shen Zichuan's pillow and sniffed the air. Are you wearing some fragrance? I apply 10 caddies of rouge a day, Shen Zichuan replied. Is that so? Xiao Chuye laughed. Shen Zichuan walked ahead while Xiao Chuye followed, blocking the night breeze from brushing against Shen Zichuan. Sensing a sudden coolness on the back of his neck, Shen Zichuan's head whipped around. Xiao Chuye scraped a fingertip lightly over Shen Zichuan's skin, then held it up to his nose, puzzled. What is this smell? Xiao Chuye wondered aloud. It's like... Shen Zichuan threw the blanket over Xiao Chuye's head and replied coolly, That's the smell of gunpowder on your own body. After standing still a moment, Xiao Chuye lifted the edge of the blanket with lightning speed and draped it over Shen Zichuan's head as well. Sticking his head out from the eaves of the roof, Ding Tao fished out his little book and exclaimed, Way to go, Argongza. You got him. Is he just writing this in the book, too? I know. 10 caddies. That's the end of the chapter. What is happening? Listen, I know that when books open up, you know, things have to be established and, like, the tone shifts and everything. But if you told me when I started this volume that, like, this was gonna be the tone of things right now, like, I don't know, this just... We've gone on such a journey just in this book alone. And we are on chapter 37, which is called Firearms. You're right, Blue. You also need breaks from serious business from time to time. Yeah. I really like the mention of gunpowder, and then immediately this chapter is called Firearms. The world darkened before Shen Zichuan, crowded under the blanket with Xiao Chuye. Oh, they're under the blanket together. Okay, wait. I wasn't visualizing that right. I thought Shen Zichuan threw it on Xiao Chuye's head, and then Xiao Chuye, like, threw it back entirely onto him. No, we're both under the blanket. Okay, excuse me. Crowded under the blanket with Xiao Chuye, he heard him say, So the smell is coming from me. It sure is pungent. You got firearms for the Imperial Army? Brass muskets. Xiao Chuye held his finger to Shen Zichuan's nose to let him take a sniff. Mixed with your scent, I couldn't tell it apart for a moment. I don't have a scent. The tip of Shen Zichuan's nose twitched. Did you raid the 8 Great Battalion's armory? Firearms were strictly regulated by the Imperial Court. In recent years, the earlier bamboo barrel design had been exchanged for brass barrels and improved on considerably. This new design became the weapon of the 8 Great Battalion's Chun Chuan Battalion. These weapons were lethal but difficult to control. The projectiles had a limited range, and loading and reloading took time. Since the 8 Great Battalions were tasked with guarding the capital, and their battlegrounds were most often the alleyways of Chudu itself, not only were these firearms wasted in their hands, they became a burden. The 8 Great Battalions had eventually set them aside. They were brought out only during annual training exercises at the drill grounds. But what might not have suited the 8 Great Battalions was perfect for the Libe armored cavalry. The famed fighting force was a heavy cavalry, with a very small number of infantry and light cavalry. They favored direct attacks that struck like monstrous waves. In the early years, before Xiao Fengshu, the Zhou Empire had set up a garrison cavalry at Luoxia Pass. To counter the speed of the Biansha horsemen, the Empire spared no expense purchasing horses in an attempt to build their very own herd. But the horses they purchased from the Biansha tribes were often their inferior steeds. True Biansha horses were fierce breeds that had been crossed with the wild wolves at the foot of the Hongyan Mountains. That's the first, not realistic thing I think I've come across in the book. I just was about to be like, crossing horses with wolves? Paired with scimitars and sturdy warriors, they reigned invincible wheresoever they rode. No, it does not compute. It was with this in mind that Xiao Fengshu established the Li Bei armored cavalry as a force of heavily armored men and horses. They formed a living barrier of steel in the northwest, preventing the Biansha horsemen's furious assaults from breaching this armored wall. The northwest was a boundless sea of grass. If the Li Bei armored cavalry could be equipped with muskets, the long distance the Biansha horsemen had to ride to engage them would become an advantage for the Li Bei armored cavalry, leaving enough time for the firearms to be loaded. By the time the horsemen arrived before them, they would be within shooting range. For Li Bei, a bird gun like this would be akin to bestowing wings on a tiger. Even with Shi Guan removed, the 8 great battalions remain the 8 great battalions. Xiao Zhiye took a step closer and nudged Shen Zichuan toward the room with his chest. There's been no raid on the Imperial Armory. They've only changed hands. Don't worry. I'm just playing with them. Shen Zichuan looked as if he couldn't care less. He took a few steps forward and said, "Can't you at least take the blanket off to walk?" The days are short, and the nights are long. Why not carry a candle for a moonlit stroll? Xiao Zhiye grinned. Do you want to come play with me, too? If they weren't obtained through official channels, you were better off keeping them hidden. Shen Zichuan lifted the blanket and ducked out, stalking through Chudu reeking of gunpowder. You're lucky it's the middle of the night. It wouldn't matter if it were noon. Xiao Zhiye tucked the pillow under one arm and raised the other high to hold the blanket up as he walked. Sweeping his eyes across the eaves, he said, "Everyone knows Xiao Zi'an loves to play. They'll think the guns are for shooting little birds off roofs." Ding Tao and Gu Jin, sprawled on the roof above, shuddered in unison. Once inside, Xiao Zhiye threw the blanket and pillow onto his bed, kicked off his boots, and crossed the woolen rug to the bath. He was halfway undressed when he leaned out from behind the curtains. "Have you bathed?" Shen Zichuan rinsed his mouth and said, "Yes." So Xiao Zhiye took a bath by himself. He moved fast, but still, when he stepped out to dry himself, Shen Zichuan had already laid down and turned away from him. Xiao Zhiye glanced at the back of Shen Zichuan's neck, which he had covered up tightly, then hastily toweled his hair and blew out the candle. Shen Zichuan listened as Xiao Zhiye sat on the edge of the settee and opened a box to look for something. "Lanzhou." Xiao Zhiye closed the box. "Are you asleep?" Shen Zichuan answered flatly, "Yep." The Court of Judicial Review summoned a great number of physicians today, yet they didn't alert the Court of Imperial Physicians, Xiao Zhiye said. "What did you do to Ji Lei?" "You want to hear horror stories this late at night?" Shen Zichuan asked. "They're going to interrogate the guards at the Imperial prison tomorrow morning." Just going through the motions, Shen Zichuan thought. He didn't know whether Hai Liangyi could tolerate such a heinous act, but Xue Xiuzhuo certainly could. He had gotten the confession he wanted, so Ji Lei was a loss that could be written off. This was a mess of Shen Zichuan's making, but he had never had concerns about it. He knew Xue Xiuzhuo and Shi Hongshuan would be forced to clean up after him. He said, "I've been towing the line, even if they investigate." "Dry my hair for me." Xiao Zhiye had lain down, but now quickly sat back up. Shen Zichuan closed his eyes and pretended to sleep. Stop faking it. Hurry up, Xiao Chuya said. Lanzhou. Then again. Shen Lanzhou. Shen Zichuan suddenly felt the bed dip under new weight. He opened his eyes in shock. The covers had been lifted. Xiao Chuya had squeezed in and was nuzzling his sopping hair against Shen Zichuan's back, instantly making a wet patch on his clothes. Tugging on his blanket, Shen Zichuan blurted, Xiao are you 3? More or less, Xiao Chuya replied lazily. Weren't you asleep? Don't let me wake you. The more Shen Zichuan feigned sleep, the wetter he became. That cold mop of hair stuck to him, and behind it was Xiao Chuya, who smelled just like the scent on the handkerchief last night. My clothes are wet, Shen Zichuan said, opening his eyes. There was no reply. Stop pretending to sleep. Then, Xiao. Shen Zichuan propped himself up and said into the darkness, Xiao you're an asshole. The asshole considerately handed him a dry cloth, then turned his back to him expectantly. I cannot right now. Also, I love that thing. I just love that thing in books when it's like, so-and-so, you're an asshole. And then the narration is like, the asshole did this. That just gets me every single time. On the rooftop, Ding Tao tucked his hands into his sleeves. It's so cold even on days it's snowing. I'm afraid it's going to be a hard winter. Gu Jin handed him the wineskin and rubbed his hands. We've kept watch for 2 nights. There should be a shift change tomorrow morning. Ding Tao took a sip of the wine, which warmed him a little. Burrowing his hands even deeper into opposite sleeves, he lay down beside Gu Jin and looked at the night sky. Nothing's happening tonight, either. The task is arduous. The road is long. Gu Jin corked the wineskin. His ears suddenly twitched, and he rolled onto his stomach, eyes darting back and forth like a falcon's in the dark. The soft creak of trodden snow carried over the wind. Gu Jin didn't think twice. With a flick of his hand, he threw out a blade. The northwest corner, he hissed. Ding Tao leapt up, soared across the rooftop, and struck out into the darkness with one hand. A figure in a jet black robe dodged his blow smoothly. He moved like a specter, concealing himself in shadows as he attempted to flee. Ding Tao, flexible thing that he was, dropped at once and hung upside down from the eaves, only to see 3 steel needles flying right for his face. Using the handle of the brush in his hand, he swept aside the needles with a wooden thwack. By the time he looked again, the stranger was gone. Ding Tao landed soundlessly on the ground. His qinggong was outstanding. Even when landing on such a fragile crust of snow, he left no footprints. And there's a footnote for qinggong. Literally, lightness technique, the martial arts skill of moving swiftly and lightly through the air. Gu Jin surveyed the courtyard from the rooftop. That man's no amateur if he can escape my eyes. Taozi, could you tell who it was? Ding Tao picked up the steel needles and held them between his fingers to examine them. In an instant, he learned a great deal. Fine as a hair and dipped in snake venom. This is no product of Chudu, but a foreign gimmick imported through the port of Yongchuan in the 13 cities of Jueshi. His qinggong was good, and his ability to mask his breathing was exceptional. Although he carried no saber, I'd bet he's an embroidered uniform guard. He carefully stashed the steel needles in his own bamboo tube and somersaulted back onto the rooftop. The embroidered uniform guard have had a number of officials removed from office. Skilled masters of the fourth rank and above are few and far between, Gujin said. Who would come sniffing around our manor at this hour? Hard to say. Ding Tao touched a hand to his lapels with trepidation. He almost poked a hole in my book. Gujin drank his wine, lost in thought. Ding Tao sat cross-legged and whispered, You know, I've carried this book for years. It was a reward from the heir consort herself. Even when I went to fight those Biansha Baldies, it never got stabbed before. What a close call. Really too close of a call. I've written practically everything in it. Did I ever tell you? My father's book was stolen when someone slit his throat. Good heavens, the things that were written in there. I almost lost my life chasing after that book. Jinga, I'm telling you, everyone should keep a journal. You get forgetful when you grow old. Look at you. You drink wine all day long. You'll probably have forgotten how much money you have hidden away before you turn 40. Why don't you tell me, and I'll write it down in here for you. Gujin stuffed cotton into his ears and began to meditate. Hi, Wolf. Are we shipping the Rooftop Bros? You know, I was thinking that for a moment. And then I was like, oh, well, they're kind of getting on each other's nerves. But that does not, that is the opposite of precluding shipping. So I don't know. We might do that. It could happen. The next morning, Shen Zichuan was first to wake. In fact, he'd hardly slept. With Xiao Chuye crowding behind him, the two of them had fought over the blanket all night. Besides, Shen Zichuan couldn't relax with such a hulk of a person curled up at his back. Xiao Chuye was still sound asleep, clutching the pillow in his arms. As Shen Zichuan waited for him to wake, he felt something else awaken instead. Xiao Chuye's erection pressed against him from behind, hot and hard and impossible to ignore. The temperature on the bed quickly rose by several degrees. Xiao Chuye soon woke, though from the heat or hardness was anyone's guess. He swore hoarsely and sat up. Xiao Chuye tossed the pillow aside and cast a glance at Shen Zichuan, only to find Shen Zichuan looking steadily back. He grabbed at his own hair and flung out a hand to cover Shen Zichuan's head with the blanket, blocking that gaze. Then he climbed out of bed and plunged straight into the pool, without even stopping for his shoes. Chen Yang was waiting outside, listening for signs of activity, when he saw Shen Zichuan step out. He didn't know what to say as they came face to face. Shen Zichuan pointed calmly in the direction of the bath hall and sauntered off. Again. Yes, again, it's a recurring event, I guess. Anna, exactly. By the time Xiao Chuye emerged from the bath, his head was clear. He ate a little breakfast and listened to Chen Yang's report of the intruder the night before. Embroidered uniform guard? Xiao Chuye thought for a second. He didn't come for me. He must have been here to keep an eye on Shen Lanzhou. Then he's the Empress Dowager's man, Chen Yang said. But the guard is severely lacking in manpower at the moment. How could there still be such skilled men to send? The embroidered uniform guards still got plenty of secrets. Xiao Chuye rose to his feet. I'm going to morning court. We'll talk when I return. After formally dismissing the morning's court session, Li Jianheng, holding his hand warmer, sat on the dragon throne and watched as the various officials split up to stand on either side of the hall. "So the verdict has been rendered?" he asked apprehensively. Xue Xiuzhuo knelt to answer. "Yes, Your Majesty." Ji Lei made a full confession regarding his intent to commit treason at the Nanlin hunting grounds. The evidence against him is conclusive. The Court of Judicial Review has worked through the night to sort through the confession, and Secretariat Elder Hai has submitted it to Your Majesty. In the fortnight since the Hua faction case, the 3 judicial offices have conducted a number of joint trials. In addition to their leader, Ji Lei, the 2 vice commanders and 4 assistant commanders of the Embroidered Uniform Guard have all been sentenced to immediate execution by decapitation, while the judge and accompanying battalion commanders present at the Nanlin hunting grounds have been sentenced to prison to await execution pending review. As long as a verdict has been reached, then good, Li Jianheng said. Secretariat Elder, you've worked hard. Come, it's not good to kneel for too long. Bring him a seat. When Hai Liangyi was seated, Li Jianheng continued. The Hua clan colluded with eunuchs and the Embroidered Uniform Guard to stage a coup. It's really too abominable. Pan Rugui abused his office as the Director of Writ at the Directorate of Ceremonial Affairs. He was greedy for power and wealth, and wicked beyond remedy. This man mustn't be held in custody to await execution. He should be beheaded immediately. After the Secretariat Elder's previous admonishments, we have tossed and turned through many sleepless nights. After much thought, we are determined to work diligently toward the prosperity of the state from now on. Hai Liangyi rose at once to bow again. Li Jianheng raised his hands. Sit, Secretariat Elder. Please sit. There are so many matters that require the Secretariat Elder's counsel. It wouldn't be a stretch for us to refer to the Secretariat Elder as Xiansheng. In the future, we hope everyone will work as one to assist us. If you have something to say, you may boldly speak your mind. Xue Xiuzhuo looked up in surprise, though his expression remained neutral. He knelt in unison with the officials on his left and right, and sang the emperor's praises. Li Jianheng excitedly motioned for everyone to rise. After a few more words, he dismissed the audience and invited Secretariat Elder Hai alone to stay and share a meal with him. Xiao Zhiye found himself walking out beside Xue Xiuzhuo. I wonder what your excellency said to his majesty, Xue Xiuzhuo said, that his majesty is now willing to show such respect to his wisest subjects. His majesty is young and strong. This is precisely the time for him to show his mettle and realize his potential. Even if I said nothing, he'd have come to the same conclusion, Xiao Zhiye replied. The Court of Judicial Review has been busy these days. Thank you for your hard work, Lord Yanqing. It's only natural to concern oneself with all matters pertaining to one's post. I have merely done my duty. As Xue Xiuzhuo spoke, he looked at Xiao Zhiye with a smile. I hear your excellency has traveled to Mount Feng often these last few days. Is there any fun to be had there? Xiao Zhiye smiled in return. The first snow on Mount Feng is a sight to behold. Several deer have been spotted recently as well. I've been thinking of capturing a few for fun. If you're free, would you like to go and have a look together? Xue Xiuzhuo gave an airy wave of his hand. I am but a frail scholar. What do I know about hunting? I wouldn't want to dampen your spirits. The two parted ways at the palace gates. as Xiao Zhiye watched him recede into the distance. His smile started to fade. Chen Yang was standing beside the carriage. He waited until Xiao Zhiye arrived before lifting the curtain for him. "Your Excellency, Shifu has departed for Chudu," he said. Xiao Zhiye nodded. After hesitating for a moment, Chen Yang continued. "Our man in the Court of Judicial Review brought word that Jilei is dead." "How did he die?" Xiao Zhiye asked. Chen Yang gestured sharply, but kept his voice down. "He was skinned." So he really made good on his promise then. "When they found him, he looked like neither human nor ghost. He should have died last night, but Xue Xiuzhuo kept him hanging on until the confession was presented to His Majesty. Only then did he let him breathe his last." Xiao Zhiye sat down in silence. 5 years ago, Jilei interrogated Shen Zichuan in the imperial prison. Later, Jilei sent Feng Chuan to publicly humiliate him with the donkey roast, Chen Yang said. Now Shen Zichuan has repaid the favor in kind, and turned Jilei into... Your Excellency, this man is vindictive. There's already bad blood between him and us. It's far too dangerous to keep him at your side. Xiao Zhiye twisted the bone ring on his thumb and said nothing. Oh, what broke the stream? Me saying that he was skinned? Did y'all hear... What... I just got to the end of the chapter. Did y'all, like, miss anything? Because there were, like, a couple paragraphs after it said he was skinned. Okay, we're good? Cool. Okay, yeah, that broke even the stream. He was skinned. The internet was like, we don't like that. Henry, is your favorite... Wait, your favorite character? Who are y'all talking about? Your actual favorite character or your least favorite character? We're as good as Jilei isn't. Yeah. So we're on page 387 for chapter 38, which is called Military Discipline. Oh, your haterism against Li Jianhong. Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. Winter deepened, and snow fell for days at a time. Xiao Zhiye grew lazier, making fewer and fewer trips to the drill grounds. He made the acquaintance of several of the famous Longyou merchants and procured a number of valuable items, including pearls imported from the port of Yongchuan and jade from Hezhou. Exquisite little trinkets all. Li Jianhong had become diligent indeed. He attended court sessions without fail, no matter how cold the weather, and sought daily tutelage from Hai Liangyi. When he saw Xiao Zhiye slacking on the job, he gently advised him against it. It seemed he really had changed. Xiao Zhiye was happy to see it. He felled 2 deer on Mount Feng and offered them to the palace. Still traumatized from the donkey roast, Li Jianhong kept his distance from game. He bestowed the venison on Hai Liangyi instead. As the end of the year approached, so did 2 major proceedings. The sacrificial ceremony to the gods and ancestors, and the officials' banquet. The 6 ministries and 24 yemen of the imperial palace were up to their necks in work. Since the Directorate of Ceremonial Affairs was still without a leader, someone had to sign off on the decisions. For this, they turned to Li Jianhong. But Li Jianhong was baffled by such things. He had to trouble Hai Liang Yi and the Ministry of Rights each time. Bestowed the venison is a funny phrase. You are right. Chu Du was bustling. When Li Jianhong saw that Xiao Chuye alone was idle, he assigned him the important task of reviewing the 8th grade battalion's roster, effectively putting all patrol and defense of the capital entirely in Xiao Chuye's hands. This was one responsibility Xiao Chuye couldn't shirk. He had no choice but to throw himself into his task. And since Shen Zichuan was consigned to following Xiao Chuye wherever he went, it was inevitable that he came into frequent contact with the Imperial Army. On one such day, when Tan Tai Hu had just returned to the duty office at the end of patrol, so recently he had yet to remove his weapon, he saw Shen Zichuan standing outside. He rubbed his frozen, scar-ridden face and marched over. Shen Zichuan turned and watched as Tan Tai Hu stormed toward him. The 8th son of Shen Wei? Tan Tai Hu stopped in his tracks. Coldly, he said, "Shen Wei is your old man, is he not?" "Are you looking for my old man, or for me?" Shen Zichuan asked. "Of course I'm looking for you. Shen Wei was reduced to fucking ashes 5 years ago." Tan Tai Hu paced around Shen Zichuan. "Your days in Chudu must have been comfortable. Check out this figure. You look like one of those pampered courtesans on Donglong Street, with a taste for food and wine." It was obvious Tan Tai Hu had come to make trouble. Chen Yang stood silent off to one side, while the rest of the Imperial Army men in the courtyard craned their necks to watch the show. Tan Tai Hu continued. "A perky ass and a slender willow waist, cheeks like peach blossoms and eyes like a fox. You'd be a first-class courtesan in Xiangyun Villa. Why are you running about in the wind and snow with our supreme commander instead of living the good life?" Coming to a stop, Tan Tai Hu fixed his sharp gaze on Shen Zichuan. It was only because Shen Wei licked the hooves of the Li Bei armored cavalry's horses 5 years ago that the 6 prefectures of Zhongbo didn't become manure pits for Biansha horses. "I see you've learned from your old man. So which part of His Excellency will you be licking?" "Behind their curtains, the brothel girls are all top of their field in certain techniques. So what's your talent? What makes you worthy of standing alongside men who have been to war?" "If I'm not worthy, will the vice commander revoke my authority token and kick me out?" Shen Zichuan said with a smile. Can I just say, this, like, rant that he just had, it reminds me of the thing where, like, when someone is, like, super homophobic, but you can tell that behind it all, they're just sort of fantasizing about gay sex. Like, that's what this monologue was. Henry, do not ask me that question. "If I'm not worthy, will the vice commander revoke my authority token and kick me out?" Shen Zichuan said with a smile. "Why would I go to the trouble? You're a dog sitting at the doorstep of the Imperial Army. Even a kick is an honor you don't deserve. It's only because of our supreme commander that your granddaddy here is talking to you today. Since you've become a man's plaything, it's time you were enlightened to your new reality. You're no man. Under orders of the Son of Heaven, I carry the authority token of the Embroidered Uniform Guard. I'm here as a servant to the throne, not anyone's plaything," Shen Zichuan said. "If I'm the Imperial Army's dog, then you gentlemen are no different. We all walk around Chudu on the same Imperial salary. If there is any enlightenment to be had, then we must be enlightened together." Hands on his twin blades, Tan Tai Hu widened his tiger-like eyes in anger. You, the same as men like us? Fucking Shen dog. I was the senior battalion commander of the Dengzhou garrison troops in Zhongbo. He lurched forward, seething. My brothers were in the sinkhole at Chashu River. Do you have any idea what that was like? Yes, he does. Those men were still alive when they were shot with arrow after arrow until they looked like pincushions. 30,000 men were buried in the sinkhole. 30,000 men. Shen Zichuan's expression remained unchanged. I know, I'm so tired of people being like, you have no idea how terrible this was. He was literally there with his brother dying on his back. My old man and mother were in Dongzhou too, Tantai Hu continued. When the Biansha horsemen came, the treacherous Shen bastard fled. He abandoned those who couldn't run, all the old and vulnerable in Dongzhou. My parents. Those Biansha bastards massacred city after city. They dragged my little sister for 2 li before raping and killing her at the city gates. And here you are, living a comfortable life without a care in the world. Stick your ass out for someone to fuck, and you can be pardoned of all sins. A freezing wind swept the courtyard. By the time Chen Yang realized the situation was getting out of hand, it was too late. Tantai Hu gripped Shen Zichuan by the collar, eyes red. How dare you talk back to me? All you young masters born with silver spoons in your mouths. How would you know how many died in that battle? How would you know there are people starving to death in Zhongbo to this day? How's life in Chudu, huh? You sleep well, eat well, and people absolve you of blame over and over. But what about the dead of Zhongbo? Who's going to pay for their lives? Without warning, Shen Zichuan grabbed Tantai Hu's arm and flung him to the ground. You know, Henry, that's a good question, because I kind of thought that, oh, everybody knows that he survived the Chasha sinkhole. They were questioning him at the beginning, like, well, how did you survive? But now, apparently, they don't know that he was even there. And yeah, no one's absolved him of blame. It was such an earth-shattering move that everyone around them took a halting step backward. Shen Zichuan wiped his hands clean in the snow and looked at Tantai Hu. Who? Why don't you settle the score with your own people? It took a month for the Biansha horsemen to enter our territory, cross the banks of the Chasha River, and reach Dongzhou. When Shunwei shrank back from battle, you valiant, iron-willed men should have snapped his neck and risen up to fortify the city's defenses. Shen Zichuan straightened. Humiliate me, hate me. It's no skin off my back. This world demands a debt of blood be repaid in kind. So killing me would be meting out heaven's justice and appeasing the wrath of the people. He spat at Tantai Hu and laughed cruelly. What a fucking load of shit. The Biansha horsemen massacred the cities. The Biansha horsemen killed those 30,000 soldiers. If you want to fuck with me, wash the Biansha horsemen's piss off your head first. My life is cheap, and I won't be missed in death. But will it write off the Biansha horsemen's debts? Don't you fucking try to absolve yourself of guilt, Tantai Hu snapped. Wasn't your old man the one who let the Biansha horsemen in? Yes. His father. Then kill me. Shen Zichuan raised a finger and made a slashing motion across his neck. Please, hurry up and kill me. Kill me, and the bloodline of the traitor Shen will be severed. Tantai Hu roared to his feet, pulled out his twin blades, and charged at Shen Zichuan. Ding Tao had only just woken and come into the courtyard when he was met with this scene. In a panic, he shouted, Lao Hu, don't hurt him. I'm supposed to be watching him. But Tantai Hu was beyond reason. His twin blades whistled through the air. Ding Tao leaped 3 feet in alarm and tried to charge in, but Gu Jin grabbed the back of his collar and held him in place. Lao Hu lost his entire family in Zhongbo, Gu Jin said. You can't expect him to let Shen Zichun go. But wasn't the culprit Shen Wei? Ding Tao exclaimed. What does it have to do with Shen Zichun? Gu Jin hesitated a moment, but didn't go on. Tantai Hu's blade sliced down inches before Shen Zichun's face. Shen Zichun spun, kicking his assailant's wrist askew. Tantai Hu's arm numbed as his blade flew from his hand. At that moment, the curtain in front of the office lifted. Yang Zhongzhi, the vice minister of the Ministry of War, stared with wide eyes at the blade hurtling toward him. Chen Yang raised a hand to grab the hilt, but Xiao Chuye was faster. With a swing of his sheathed blade, he struck the blade down into the snow. The steel pierced the ground with such violent force that it shook the entire courtyard. The men of the Imperial Army fell to their knees. Please pardon our offense, Supreme Commander, they chorused. Xiao Chuye ignored them. He returned his blade to his waist and raised a hand to lift the curtain for Yang Zhongzhi. He smiled apologetically. My failure to discipline my subordinates caused alarm for Vice Minister Yang today. Yang Zhongzhi didn't dare tarry. After stumbling through a few awkward pleasantries, he hurried out of the courtyard, leapt into his carriage, and after declining a farewell, was soon on his way. Once the guest had left, Xiao Chuye turned back and swept his eyes over the courtyard of kneeling men. Chen Yang was aware he had blundered. He hastened to say, Your Excellency, this subordinate was negligent in my supervision of the men. I didn't... You've watched the show long enough. As Xiao Chuye spoke, Meng came to land on his shoulder. He took some white meat from a waist pouch and fed it to the gerfalcon. Zhao Hui wouldn't have done such a thing. Chen Yang paled. Xiao Chuye didn't reprimand Chen Yang in front of the men. Chen Yang was the chief of his guards and his most trusted aide. Under the watchful eyes of others, he could not shame Chen Yang by berating him publicly. Chen Yang would lose his authority among his Imperial Army brothers and be unable to hold up his head before them. But Xiao Chuye knew these words cut Chen Yang deepest. Now, there is art. We like it. Good art. And you're so right. Henry, keeping a notebook does make Ding Tao smarter. You can't blame Xiao Chuye one bit. Look at him, he's gorgeous. Yeah. Chen Yang and Zhao Hui were both promising young men, hand-picked by Xiao Fengshu. Zhao Hui was calm and steady, and under Xiao Jiming's command, his meritorious military deeds were innumerable. He was a deputy general whom few were bold enough to disrespect, even in Chudu. Meanwhile, Chen Yang had remained in the Libei prince's manor until he finally followed Xiao Chuye to Chudu 5 years ago. He was prudent, and what he feared most of all was being told he was inferior to Zhao Hui. This was a contest between brothers of the same clan. These words were more than a wake-up call. They shamed him to the core. Xiao Chuye turned to Tantai Hu. When I assumed command 5 years ago, the Imperial Army was a bunch of rotten thugs with no regard for military discipline, who held their supreme commander in contempt, he said as he stroked Meng. I can't lead soldiers like that. If you want to stay in the Imperial Army, either sort yourself out and abide by the rules, or pack up and fuck off. Tantaihu's chest heaved. He said indignantly, Your Excellency is right, of course. We have all listened to you in the past. But what's he supposed to be? Can someone like this be considered a soldier? As vice commander, I outrank him. Is it wrong of me to dress him down? There's no way I'm going to kiss the ass of someone who sells it. You know, he's, this guy, we've already learned that he doesn't have a whole lot of tact or impulse control, but he's saying this, he's basically saying this to the person who he accused Shen Zichuan of selling himself to. I don't know if that's the best idea. The authority token hanging from his belt belongs to the embroidered uniform guard, and his current duty is as my personal guard. Once you get to where I am, you can shame him however you like. That will be your prerogative. Xiao Chuye looked down at him. You think he did nothing wrong? Straightening his spine, Tantaihu said, That's right. Oh, I'm sorry. I was wondering why that didn't make any sense. You think you did nothing wrong. Backing up. You think you did nothing wrong? Straightening his spine, Tantaihu said, That's right. Then why stay here and suffer this indignity? Xiao Chuye said, Go. Tantaihu raised his head in disbelief. For this man, you would dismiss me from my post? There are no personal grudges within the Imperial Army, so don't fucking try to play matchmaker for me. I'm not doing this for anyone. Xiao Chuye's voice was dangerously low. I have final say in the Imperial Army. If you can make your own decisions, why bother calling me your commander? Strip off this armor and remove your blades. Then you're free to demand repayment of any blood debt you're owed. If you can take him down in 3 moves, I'll get on my knees and acknowledge my mistake. But when you don this armor and wear the token of the Imperial Army, you listen to me. All of you enjoyed quite the spectacle today, trampling all over my reputation to amuse yourselves. You've got guts and backbone to spare. Why bother with military discipline? Wouldn't it be more gratifying to fuck off and be bandits in the mountains? The soldiers hung their heads, too cowed to utter another word. Meng finished his meat and raised his head to stare at them. Don't you all love calling me a fool blinded by lust? Xiao Chuye continued. I'll be exactly that today. Remove Tantaihu's authority token and send him out the door. Please have mercy, Your Excellency. Cries rose from the Imperial Army. Tantaihu refused to back down. He tore his authority token off with trembling fingers and said, I've regarded Your Excellency as a brother and have been grateful to you for the past 5 years. I would have laid down my life for you. What wrong have I committed today? If Your Excellency wants to break my heart and dismiss me from my post because of a pretty man, fine. I, Tantaihu, concede defeat. With that, he placed his authority token and helmet together on the ground and kowtowed thrice to Xiao Chuye, then rose to his feet and stripped off his armor. Wearing nothing but his inner garment, he turned to Shen Zichuan. See how long you can survive seducing those you serve. I'll seek my vengeance on the Biansha Baldis in days to come, but you won't escape either. Tantaihu wiped his eyes and cupped his hands to everyone around him. My brothers, until we meet again. Turning his back, he walked out of the courtyard and disappeared from view. Well... Blue. Oh my god, you're right. The funny thing about Saint of Suto illustrating this is that if you're not paying attention, Ding Tao looks like Shui Meng in the art. Oh, absolutely. If I didn't know what series this was, I would just say, is that Shui Meng and who are these people? um, well, that's the end of the chapter. And it is absolutely time for me to take a break. And when I come back from that break, which will be about 5 to 10 minutes, probably closer to 10 minutes, I think I'm gonna make some more tea. Oh yeah, we have 3 chapters to go. So we're almost done. So when I come back, we will be on page 397 for chapter 39, which is called Vicious Beast. Also, I don't like the fact that Tantai Hu is now, like, a named enemy of Shen Zichuan. I don't like that. So yeah, I will see y'all in a bit. Hi, hello. I'm back. I definitely didn't fill my mug super high up with tea and, like, spill a tiny bit of it on the way here and have to run around and deal with that. Nope, that did not just happen. Not at all. Thankfully, it was not a disaster. Uh, Henry, I do not blame Shin Zichuan at all for his fixation on Xiao Chi's scent. The, the way I'd be sniffing that man. No, see, I didn't burn myself at all. It just, like, went onto the floor. So, as I said, it could have been a disaster, but it wasn't. So, we only have 3 chapters left, and they're short chapters. And we are on page 397 for chapter 39, Vicious Beast. A charcoal fire burned in the hall, warming the room. Chen Yang had been kneeling for almost an hour. Xiao Chuye sat in the principal seat, reading a book on military strategy, while the Imperial Army generals knelt just beyond the screen. It was silent inside and out. As the saying went, if a general has yet to be revered, he must establish reverence through a show of force. And there's a footnote. This is from New Treatise on Effective Military Discipline, a military manual written in 1560 by Qi Jiguang, a Ming Dynasty general who defended China from invasion by Japanese pirates. When Xiao Chuye took command of the Imperial Army 5 years ago, he had put on just such a show of strength and power. He required absolute authority over these men, and that required their respect. Over the last 5 years, he had fairly meted out reward and punishment, never skimping on salaries nor supplies. He went so far as to spend from his own pocket to make up any deficiencies. He was a generous superior to his subordinates, though the overcoat on his back was the same sent to him by his sister-in-law 3 years ago. The autumn hunt incident allowed the Imperial Army to hold their heads high. Their name was lauded now. Their prestige overshadowed that of the 8 great battalions, and for the moment, they had the world at their feet. The same browbeaten soldiers who used to cower before the 8 great battalions were now bold enough to boss them around. This was not a blessing, but a curse. A head swollen with success would lead one astray. Xiao Chuye needed an opportunity to knock some sense back into the Imperial Army, and Tantai Hu had given him one. Chen Yang didn't dare raise his head. When Xiao Chuye rapped on the table, he got up immediately to refill the tea. Once the cup was filled, he returned to kneeling. Xiao Chuye hadn't said a single word the entire night, so Chen Yang knelt on the ground until dawn. Many times, leaving words unsaid made one more ashamed than if they'd been spoken aloud. I like how he was literally just sitting there reading a book on military strategy, just in front of everybody. The next day, Xiao Chuye was due to attend morning court. After dressing, he said to Chen Yang, "You don't have to follow me today. Take a break." Chen Yang's legs were numb from kneeling. Palms splayed on the ground, he kowtowed and called in a hoarse voice, "Master." He had always addressed Xiao Chuye as Your Excellency. This plea came from his heart. Xiao Chuye paused in his steps, but did not look back. Chen Yang kowtowed again. "I implore Master to dole out whatever punishment he deems fit." Xiao Chuye raised a hand and dismissed his attendants. Only when the hall had emptied did he turn to look at Chen Yang. "If a man has done nothing wrong, What need is there for punishment? The sweat on Chen Yang's forehead dripped into his eyes. I was wrong. There was a long silence. Finally, Xiao Chuye said, Zhao Hui has followed my elder brother to war on the frontier for years. He has climbed the ranks. Within 5 years, he may receive his own manor and a conferred title. You are both good men, handpicked by my father. Why is it that he, Zhao Hui, enjoys such an honor while you, Chen Yang, have to follow a hoodlum rotting away in captivity? Chen Yang's lips were bloodless. How could I think this way? The air has his strengths, to be sure, but Master holds up the sky above my head. Zhao Hui and I are brothers of the same clan. Our glories and failures are one and the same. I hope you truly understand this principle, Xiao Chuye said. Brothers who fight among themselves and families who draw swords on each other are a rotten lot. They'll destroy themselves before outsiders ever lift a finger. By remaining in Chudu with me, you left all our family matters back at home in Zhao Hui's care. When his younger sister married the deputy director of the Ministry of Rights here in Chudu, you stood in as her family here so she wouldn't be stranded in a strange house and would have a brother beside her during the spring festival and other holidays. You must contend with will and spirit if you want to accomplish great things, but not at the expense of moral principles. Righteous ardor and heroic spirit make a good man. Why are you anxious about being compared to him? Zhao Hui wouldn't have done what you did yesterday, because he would have considered Da Ge's reputation. You are now the chief of the Imperial Army's bodyguards, yet you rely on cheap tactics like a scapegoat to unite your men. For an ounce of gratification, you'll stand by and watch your master's dignity trampled. Tantai Hu is from Zhongbo. You knew that. You assigned him to yesterday's shift so he could vent his anger. What happened, Chen Yang? In following me, have you fallen so low you've resorted to tricks like these to win people over? You've traded your master's name for a moment's satisfaction. Overcome with remorse and self-reproach, Chen Yang hung his head. I've let master down. You've let yourself down, Xiao Chuye said coolly. Get your head on straight before you resume your duties. Gu Jin will follow me for the next few days. Dazed, Chen Yang remained kneeling. He raised his head just in time to watch as Xiao Chuye lifted the curtain and stepped out. Shen Zichuan had finally gotten a good night's sleep. At present, he was waiting beside the carriage, puffing warm air into his hands as he watched the gerfalcon wheel in the snowy sky. When Xiao Chuye emerged, he stepped straight up into the carriage. Gu Jin picked up the riding crop and looked at Shen Zichuan. Shen Zichuan did not return his gaze. The curtain was partially open, and he could see Xiao Chuye looking at him meaningfully. Shen Zichuan felt eyes on his back as the Imperial Army, who had been freezing in the courtyard the entire night in penance, all raised their heads to stare. He smiled at Xiao Chuye, then made his way up. The carriage started to sway as Gu Jin drove the horses forward. Xiao Chuye passed a hand warmer to Shen Zichuan. When Shen Zichuan accepted it, Xiao Chuye pressed the back of his hand to Shen Zichuan's. So cold, Xiao Chuye said. Shen Zichuan raised a finger to push Xiao Chuye's hand away, then leaned against the side of the carriage and held the hand warmer close. You don't look happy, Xiao Chuye said. I'm happy. He looked at Xiao Chuye and continued with a smile. I'm overjoyed that Argongza spoke up for me and helped me out of my predicament. Argongza wasn't speaking up for anybody, Xiao Chuye said. Perhaps not, Shen Zichuan said. Now that reverence has been established, it's time for you to make friends of them again. When will favors be doled out? There aren't many days left for me to be your bodyguard. You should hurry if you want to use me. Xiao Chuye looked at him in silence. Chen Zichuan lifted his chin slightly in a careful pose of relaxation and exhaled. After a pause, he said, I'm no match for you when it comes to governing others. Shen Lanzhou is a good target. Place him at your side, and you can defend your authority, intimidate the tiger, and maybe even warm your bed. It's hard to find a situation where you can kill 3 birds with 1 stone. Quite impressive, Xiao Er. Voices from the street clamored outside the carriage. Inside, the tension grew thick as the silence stretched. They were just a few inches apart, yet they seemed to be separated by a natural chasm. When the carriage at last arrived at its destination, Gu Jin tactfully said not a word to interrupt them. Shen Zichuan returned the hand warmer to the small table. Such a pity, though. What's a pity? Xiao Chuya asked. Everyone thinks you spend your nights indulging in pleasures of the flesh. Shen Zichuan ran his tongue over the sharp edges of his teeth and said placidly, Who would have suspected Xiao Er to be a diligent and conscientious man of honor? You haven't so much as touched my lips, let alone fucked me. He made to lift the curtain and exit the carriage, but Xiao Chuye swiftly grabbed onto his belt. I see, Xiao Chuye grinned wickedly. If you're so eager to cross swords on the bed, I shall comply with your wish. I don't want anyone with eyes so fierce, Shen Zichuan said. I know, cross swords on the bed. I can't. They actually use that metaphor. The curtain swayed as he stepped down from the carriage, leaving Xiao Chuye's fingers empty. They twitched once, left wanting. After Tan Tai Hu's dismissal, the Imperial Army buckled down. The soldiers tucked their tails between their legs and behaved, falling back into their discipline from before the autumn hunt. Chen Yang became even more prudent and no longer turned a blind eye when others stirred up trouble. Chen Yang had hurt his foot years ago in Li Bei, and the injury still plagued him. During a harsh, cold spell in Chudu a few days later, his foot ached whenever he was on duty. One evening, Xiao Chuye tossed Chen Yang several bottles of medicinal ointment after dinner. When Chen Yang opened them that night, he found an incredibly rare ointment that Xiao Jiming had received from Master Yi Deng a few years ago. He couldn't help but reproach himself again, and threw himself into his work with renewed diligence. Tan Tai Hu, on the other hand, went home and found himself immediately in dire straits. Though everyone in his family was dead, he had adopted 3 children from Zhongbo, all of whom lived off his salary. He was unmarried and had no wife to manage household affairs. Every month he drained his salary down to the very last copper. Now their stores of grain were empty, and the new year was fast approaching. Tan Tai Hu was a veteran of Dongzhou and had many friends in Chudu. All these years, he had been the one taking care of others. Now that it was his turn, he couldn't bring himself to ask for help. Yet tightening his belt to feed the children was hardly a long-term solution either. Tan Tai Hu had reached the point of considering taking work as a debt collector for loan sharks when Chen Yang arrived on his doorstep. New Year's is right around the corner, Chen Yang said as he set down a money purse. The Supreme Commander remembers that you have 3 children at home. Sitting in his chair, Tantai Hu turned his face away. Since I'm no longer on the Imperial Army's payroll, there's no reason for me to accept money from the Imperial Army. You have Tiger in your name, but it doesn't mean you have to be a brute, Chen Yang said severely. Why do you still hold a grudge against His Excellency? You struck out at Shen Zichuan in front of everyone that day. Where is your respect for the Supreme Commander? Lack of discipline is a major taboo in the army. You've been a vice commander all these years. Don't tell me you don't understand that. What was I supposed to do? Tantai Hu asked. Whenever I see that Shen guy, I think of my parents. Chen Yang sighed. Even so, you shouldn't have humiliated him. By extension, that insults the Supreme Commander. You followed him for years. Shouldn't you know his temperament? Yet you still shot your mouth off. Tantai Hu ran a hand through his hair. I was at fault, too, said Chen Yang. I knew you were rash, but I didn't stop you. Admit your mistake if you make one, and accept your punishment if you receive one. A real man knows when to resist and when to submit. Must you burn your bridges just to prove yourself a hero? What can I do? I've already handed in my authority token. Tantai Hu felt aggrieved all over again. I followed His Excellency for 5 years. I risked my life during the autumn hunt. It wasn't easy for the Imperial Army to make a name for itself after all this time. So it unnerves the hell out of me to see that cunning fox going freely in and out of our office. The way he looks. I worry he'll lead His Excellency astray. I was anxious, and I hate him to death. I heard Ding Tao say something about how it's not his fault. Sure, who doesn't know that? But could you stand it if you were in my shoes? It wasn't some dog by the roadside that died. My parents and siblings are gone. Chen Yang was silent. Tantai Hu stomped his foot in grief and wiped haphazardly at his eyes. The thought of it still brought the scarred man to tears. Chest heaving with sobs, he said, anyone would be appalled to see a man they despise waved in front of their face, let alone one with whom they have a blood debt. The year the Zhongbo troops were defeated, those of us who survived were left with broken families and ruined homes, while we ourselves barely escaped with our lives. Chen Yang, who's going to take pity on us? Look at the 3 children in my house. They became orphans before they could talk, digging mud under the hooves of the Biansha horses to survive. Our lives are worth nothing. Chen Yang patted his shoulder and waited for him to take a few steadying breaths. But now that you have joined the Imperial Army, our Supreme Commander's word is law. Huzi, 5 years ago, when His Excellency cleaned up the Imperial Army, he wanted to take in soldiers like you, who were not native to Chudu, but the Ministry of War disapproved. Do you remember what His Excellency said then? Tantai Hu's shoulders trembled. Chen Yang went on. His Excellency said the same thing that drives you to be a soldier now. The wrongs suffered by our families have yet to be avenged, and the humiliation of our nation has yet to be redressed. The Imperial Army will one day ride our horses out of the mountain pass. When the time comes, won't slaying the enemy with your own hands be more gratifying than giving a tongue lashing to some stranger today? How is it that you've forgotten this? How could I forget? Tantai Hu said. It's never left my mind. I gave this life to His Excellency to use as he wished, all in hopes that such a day would come. Then we're done here. Chen Yang got up and pushed the money across the table to Tantai Hu. Brothers don't hold grudges. The Supreme Commander treats us as brothers and took this money from his own account. After the new year, return to your original squad, hang up a squad commander token, and resume your duties. Filled with mixed feelings, Tantai Hu saw Chen Yang out of the door. I do understand where Tantai Hu is coming from. It's just that he falls into the same thing that so many of the other people do, which is like blaming someone for what his father did. And that just gets me so bad. And I'm like, well, he's kind of in a society where like everyone does that. So I guess it makes sense. When Chen Yang returned, he ran into Shen Zichuan. The two men greeted each other on the veranda. Chen Yang lifted the curtain and went in, and Shen Zichuan knew the matter was resolved. He watched the falling snow, his thoughts drifting. A vicious beast like him could pass as fake, even if he were real, and be made real, even if he were fake. No one could tell whether happiness or anger hid behind his smile, nor could they distinguish his sincerity from his deception. I like that Shen Zichuan is actually the vicious beast in the chapter. That's interesting. It wasn't long before Chen Yang stepped out again. He lifted the curtain and nodded toward Shen Zichuan. His Excellency is ready for you to eat together. Shen Zichuan turned around and saw Xiao Chuye waiting inside, already watching him. That's a good point, Henry. If he kind of is in a situation where he's grieving and he doesn't really have any outlet for it, then he ends up just using him as the outlet. But he just doesn't really know where to put all that stuff. Yeah. Yeah, Blue, that makes sense. Well, um, so we had Vicious Beast, and now we have chapter 40, which is called Tearing and Biting. I seriously cannot get over these chapter titles because they come in like pairs or in threes, and I'm obsessed. Fresh vegetables were a rare sight in winter, and they fetched a high price in Chudu at this time of year. But thanks to the generosity of Li Jianheng, Xiao Chuye's dinner table tonight included a plate of crisp, shredded cucumber. Well, if you know, you know. Um, this this will be so confusing for anyone who doesn't know what I'm laughing about. You need some of Mike's lemonade. Side dishes that accompany the main course invigorate the spleen and eliminate toxins. And there's a footnote. From Recipes from the Garden of Contentment, a culinary treatise written by Qing Dynasty scholar Yuan Mei. Xiao Chuye ladled hot soup into a bowl and pushed it toward Shen Zichuan. You've been standing outside for so long. Warm yourself up and fill your stomach before you rest. As the saying goes, Shen Zichuan said, wiping his hands as he took a seat, one who is solicitous without reason hides nefarious intent. So, what commands does Argongza have for me? Plenty, Xiao Chuye said. We'll talk as we eat. So they ate. There was no one else in the room. The 2 bowls of rice quickly disappeared, as did the plate of shredded cucumber, split between them. Neither touched the meat dishes. New Year's is right around the corner, and my Shifu is coming to the capital, Xiao Chuye said between mouthfuls of soup. If Jigong Shifu is free, we can arrange a dinner for the 2 elders. Animal lover. Wangxian, then tangerines, and now shredded cucumber. Yeah, exactly. Oh no, Henry, I missed what Henry said. I do not want julienne cucumber to invigorate any part of my body. Oh, help. Help me. Shen Zichuan set down the chopsticks. A New Year's celebration, or a Hongmen banquet. You'll have to make that clear. My Shifu doesn't stake his life on games. New Year's celebration, Xiao Chuye said. They're the only members of the Ji family left in this generation, and it's been many years since they've seen each other. Sure, I'll prepare a big gift later and ask Shifu to come out of seclusion. Shen Zichuan was full. He pushed himself away from the table. Watching him get up, Xiao Chuye said, "You'll sleep in my room as usual tonight." Shen Zichuan looked back and smiled placidly. "I'm not going anywhere. Let's take turns in the bath. Take your time eating. I'll go first." He lifted the curtain and headed to wash up. Xiao Chuye called for the servants to clear the table. As he stood by the window, he noticed it was snowing. He turned his head and saw Shen Zichuan's silhouette, hazy through the screen. Shen Zichuan removed his outer robe, as if prying away a layer of coarse shell to reveal the soft, tender flesh within. When he lowered his head to untie his belt, butter-yellow light danced along the curve of his nape, a velvet touch upon that pristine surface. Looking at him through the screen was like scratching an itch through a boot. It magnified Xiao Chuye's desire and scattered it aimlessly through his body. It equally tickled and irritated him, eliciting a violent yearning. It was said a gentleman possessed all the virtues of jade. Yet the jade-like qualities Shen Zichuan possessed gave him a wholly different kind of allure. With those eyes and that smile, he exuded a sensual appeal even without meaning to. And this is, not spoken out loud. Come hold me. Come touch me. Come tangle your limbs with mine to your heart's content. This kind of appeal was harmless, yet persistent as a drizzle, and at some point, unbeknownst to Xiao Chuye, it had invaded his mind. Meanwhile, Shen Zichuan seemed entirely oblivious to it. He retained a kind of aloofness that was diametrically opposed to lust, making himself a study in contradictions for others to puzzle out. Xiao Chuye didn't want to keep thinking about it. He was keenly aware that this falcon was not so easily tamed. Above all things, he must remain the master of himself. He couldn't tolerate this, becoming a stranger to himself, whose basest impulses were so easily roused. Turning away, Xiao Chuye closed the window and went to the bath hall. As before, the men slept each to their own bed, with the stools distance between. Their backs were to each other, their breathing steady, as if they had fallen asleep. Xiao Chuye touched his thumb ring as his mind drifted in memory. This thumb ring didn't originally belong to him. Its first owner was Feng Yisheng of the Suotian Pass. When Feng Yisheng died in battle, he left it to Zuo Qianqiu. Wearing this thumb ring, Zuo Qianqiu made a name for himself at the Battle of Tianfei Watchtower, where he shot the fatal arrow that killed his wife. It was for this reason that Zuo Qianqiu's hair had turned white, and also why he fell from the peak of prestige and never recovered. The general had achieved fame and glory. The man himself was dead. Zuo Qianqiu could never again step onto the battlefield. His hands, which had achieved incredible feats at Tianfei Watchtower, could never again wield a bow. Anna, I so agree. What I wouldn't give to watch a drama adaptation, like this would be so good. Anything. This would be so good in live action, in the right hands. It would be so good as like an animation. I don't know. I want to see something. Xiao Chuye had learned from Zuo Qianqiu as a child. One day he asked him, "How did you end up shooting your wife?" Sanding his bowstring, Zuo Qianqiu asked in return, "Do you really want to be a general?" Xiao Chuye nodded. "Then don't start a family," Zuo Qianqiu said. "Dying after 100 battles is nothing for a general to fear. Far more terrifying are the choices a general will come to face in life. What you want for yourself and the burdens you must shoulder as a commander are not the same." Zuo Qianqiu looked at the bow, his face a mask of desolation. The wind rushing over the grassland caressed his white hair. "I hope you never find yourself in such a desperate situation," he said, eyes unfocused. "When a man faces such a decision, he will die, no matter what he chooses." "You saved tens of thousands of lives at Tianfei Watchtower." Xiao Chuye leaned against the fence. "Why didn't you want to be conferred a title?" "Because I died with that battle." Zuo Qianqiu laughed with no joy. It was not until Xiao Chuye was several years older that he understood Zuo Qianqiu's words. In the battle at Tianfei Watchtower, Zuo Qianqiu's wife was taken hostage. Between opening the gates to surrender or barring them and fighting to the death, he could only choose one. Zuo Qianqiu chose neither. He rode out of the city alone, drew his bow, and killed his beloved wife. Those who were there said it was the steadiest shot he had fired in his life. He sighted his target among a crowd of thousands. The rain was pouring that night. No one knew later if he had cried himself hoarse or when his hair had turned white. When the invaders retreated at dawn, Zuo Qianqiu stood upon the white expanse of bones and collected his wife's cold corpse. From then on, his reputation as the general of thunder on jade terraces, spread far and wide. Yet those who respected him also cursed him behind his back. A man as heartless as he became a specter in the minds of ordinary people, as if all generals were naturally so cold-blooded. Xiao Chuye treasured this thumb ring greatly, but he also feared it. He was afraid that he, too, would one day find himself caught in such a dilemma. So he never spoke freely of what he liked. Even Chen Yang, who had served at his side so many years, still had no idea of Xiao Chuye's real preferences. The wine he loved, the food he liked, or the clothing he preferred. The truth was so mixed up with falsehood that no one could really tell. But Li Bei, this word was the one vulnerability he could not obfuscate or conceal. He'd already had a taste of falling under someone else's control because he failed to keep his desire in check. So how could he court trouble again? Xiao Chuye sat up soundlessly and looked at Chen Zichuan. He raised his hand. He had only to bring it down, and he could smother this desire in its crib. But when he bent over to look at him, he saw a Shen Zichuan he had never seen before. He looked like he was having a nightmare. He was frowning, and his temples were drenched in a cold sweat that had already dampened his back. Trapped in a tide of blood, The dreaming Shen Zichuan was soaked to the bone. He reached out a hand. It dripped crimson. The dream repeated itself every night without fail. He was on the verge of going mad. Shen Zichuan twitched a few times, ever so slightly. Clammy with sweat, his tightly pursed lips slowly parted as he muttered something in his sleep. How helpless he was. Xiao Chuye suddenly plucked another thought out of that deep-seated wariness he carried. He studied Shen Zichuan, like a great beast observing its prey. Shen Zichuan was not invincible. Beyond their cryptic challenges and dread of each other, they shared the inexplicable empathy of fellow sufferers. In the dream, Shen Zichuan was weary. He no longer cried in these visions, nor struggled to dig through the corpses. He had seen through the nightmare. He already knew Jimu was dead. Hurry up. He watched the scene dispassionately. Get it over with. He urged both the Biansha horsemen and the dead on ruthlessly, wanting the blood to spill faster and the snow to fall harder. How else would this nightmare end? He no longer had any fear. The blood had eaten through his flesh, down to his marrow. He was a stray dog, feeding on rotting meat and filthy water. The hatred he received, the only evidence of his existence. Shen Zichuan's eyes flew open, and he reached out a hand that braced against Xiao Chuye's chest. A brief moment later, even as cold sweat covered him, he asked calmly, "Can't sleep?" Xiao Chuye's chest was searing. He could feel the chill of Shen Zichuan's palm through the thin fabric. "I ate too much." Someone more faint of heart would be scared to death to open his eyes in the middle of the night and find someone right above him, Shen Zichuan said. "I heard you calling my name," Xiao Chuye lied without batting an eyelid. "I had to see if you were cursing me." "If I wanted to curse you, I wouldn't do it in my dreams." Scorched by the heat of Xiao Chuye's body, Shen Zichuan retracted his fingers. But Xiao Chuye pressed Shen Zichuan's hand back to his chest. "Are you cold?" Shen Zichuan's temples were soaked with sweat. He smiled. "Yeah, I'm freezing." He had reverted back to that alluring Shen Lanzhou, though it was clear he didn't care in the least whether Xiao Chuye was tempted. This kind of ability was innate. It came to him naturally. He was a terrible person. Now, whose perspective is that narration in? Is it Shen Zichuan's saying that about himself? Can I just say, because I've been thinking it a lot, I'm sorry to stop in the middle of this, but like, normally, I feel like normally Danmei has like a main character and a main love interest. And I really can't, I know we started with Shen Zichuan, so by that metric, maybe he's the main character, but I really feel like we've equally spent time in Shen Zichuan's head and Xiao Chuye's head. I feel like they're just both the main characters. It could be Xiao Chuye thinking that too. That's what I'm kind of... It's interesting because I don't really know. Like, or, I don't know, it just feels a little ambiguous. But yeah, I really like how, like, the narrative is really, like, shared by them. Yeah, that really surprised me, actually. Xiao Chuye gripped Shen Zichuan's hands and pinned them above his head. Surrounded by Shen Zichuan's scent in the darkness, he said, "You sleep in my bed. You know very well what I think about every night. You call me impressive, but Shen Lanzhou, the impressive one is you. Ah, what's to be done then? Shen Zichuan's voice was a little hoarse. He said nonchalantly, I didn't do anything. But I want to. Xiao Qie leaned in and stared down at him. I want to do it. Choose some other death for me. Shen Zichuan allowed Xiao Qie to gather his wrists into one hand. Dying in bed is too embarrassing. I changed my mind. Xiao Qie brushed aside Shen Zichuan's damp hair with the hand he'd freed, as if examining a newly purchased jewel. I don't want you to die. I advise you not to bite this neck, Shen Zichuan said. Lanzhou. Xiao Qie sighed his name and jested. If I don't, will you let me off for the rest? Shen Zichuan looked at him. Is it fun teasing me? Xiao Qie asked. Yeah. Shen Zichuan sensed Xiao Qie gradually closing in. It's fun to see the pitiful look of a little lost wolf. Then let's have even more fun, Xiao Qie said. The Empress Dowager has been biding her time without making a move. What did she promise you? Throw it away, Lanzhou, and I'll give you much, much more. Uh-huh, Shen Zichuan laughed. I'm guessing freedom is not among the things you're offering. Maybe you don't know, Xiao R, but everything you want is written in your eyes. And at this moment, you want to chain me up, am I right? I want to forge a golden chain, Xiao Qie said. It's a pity this neck is so bare. Dog collars were first used to leash wolves, said Shen Zichuan. They were so close now, they could hear each other's breathing. I'd like to put a golden chain around your neck, too. For every sentence you speak, I'll yank it once. Let's not. Xiao Qie arched a brow. With your salary, you wouldn't be able to afford it even if you emptied your pockets. The tips of their noses were about to touch. Xiao Qie's thumb ring was digging into Shen Zichuan's wrist, already red in his grip. Xiao Qie continued, since it's... Shen Zichuan lifted his head and kissed Xiao Qie's lips. The soft touch was accompanied by icy derision. Want to go wild with abandon? There was a madness in Shen Zichuan's eyes as he murmured, Do you dare? Try tearing me apart, Xiao R. See if I care. The tightly wound string of Xiao Qie's control finally snapped, and those tempestuous waves of emotion rushed out with the force of the tide. In answer to this mockery and provocation, he ruthlessly pinned Shen Zichuan down and ravaged him with kisses as sharp as bites. Lust entangled with murderous intent. Hatred entangled with pity. Which of them was more contemptible? Which more pathetic? Their mouths opened to each other, wet and hot. Where Xiao Qie kissed Shen Zichuan gave his all in response. The sound of ragged breath carried between tongue and teeth as two wayward souls met the flames of lust and were consumed. Suddenly releasing his grip on Shen Zichuan's wrists, Xiao Qie lifted Shen Zichuan's back as he tried to press them closer together, to eliminate the last whisper of distance between their bodies. And no one, he does not say this, so let's hate each other. Each would stain the other, letting mutual hatred spin a thread that couldn't be severed. It was too agonizing to live like this, alone, with only the snow to listen to their howls in the night. They had no one to lean on but each other, so why not tear into each other until they were bloody? This life was already rotten enough. We cannot escape remnants of filth. No, we cannot. By the way, the line, this ending, this would have been a place that that would be perfectly acceptable for the volume to end. This life was already rotten enough. End the volume. But there's one more chapter. It's not over yet. The filth is all around us. Huh. Well, we're on... See, okay, now... We're ending the book on a chapter. Okay, a really short chapter. A chapter that is called Part 1. It's Lanzhou Part 1. Chapter 41. Lanzhou Part 1. So they're going to end the volume on a Part 1. And then there's a Part 2. We're ending here? Okay. With Shen Zichuan's clothes shoved out of the way, his skin spilled out like moonlight under Xiao Qie's hands, ice cold to the touch. There were no soft caresses, only desperate need. Shen Zichuan was a pool of spring water, slipping through Xiao Qie's fingers and melting into the thick darkness of night. Xiao Qie struggled to brace himself before the tidal wave of desire, and saw Shen Zichuan watching him as he gasped for breath. In those eyes was none of the heat of lust. They only reflected Xiao Qie's own absurd behavior. Now, see, I wonder if that's true or not. Like, do we actually know that Shen Zichuan is not feeling lust? Do we know that? Xiao Qie felt a thrill cut through him like a blade. He rubbed at Shen Zichuan's skin until it rippled hot and pink under his fingers. He dragged Shen Zichuan down from high in the clouds and bound him in the crooks of his arms, pressing hard against him as he put his mouth everywhere he could reach. Biting down on the back of Shen Zichuan's neck was like taking a mouthful of the most intoxicating elixir. The night had been soaked through, and now so too had the sheets, their tangled limbs dragged at the ruined bedclothes. Xiao Qie's thrusts were urgent. Within them, he gradually grasped at joy. He was a quick study, surrendering himself in that soft bank of clouds, rising only to fall again. In silence, he pushed hard into Shen Zichuan, so hard Shen Zichuan strained for breath, even as his neck arced fearlessly under Xiao Qie's eyes. Xiao Qie kissed that neck and scooped up both of Shen Zichuan's knees. He was no longer a hypocrite pretending to be immune to lust. He was an ordinary man who stormed the enemy's den and went for the kill in the dark. He would make it impossible for Shen Zichuan to remember the Chasha sinkhole. Impossible for Shen Zichuan to forget this intense merging of bodies. Yeah, I hate that guy so much, I want him to forget his terrible nightmares. They had no life-saving hopes to clutch at. This was a night of indulgence, to break free of their misery. Pleasure blazed through their bodies like an inferno. Shen Zichuan reached out for the headboard, but Xiao Qie dragged him back and locked him in his embrace. Go on, show me how feral you can be, Xiao Qie breathed into his ear. You wanted me to go wild with abandon, yet you dare to run? Don't you want to see which of us is more ruthless? I'm not afraid. Shen Zichuan's cheek chafed against the sheets as he closed his eyes and gasped for breath. His expressions of pain, of being on the verge of collapse, on his face, all utterly captivated Xiao Qiye. How did he blossom into such a tender sight? Xiao Qiye took Shen Zichuan's chin and lifted it to capture his lips, giving him no chance to rest or catch his breath. Shen Zichuan shuddered at his touch. In that moment, Xiao Qiye released everything into him. While Shen Zichuan was still trembling from the aftershock of his own climax, Xiao Qiye turned him over and thrust desperately in once more. The cold wind howled outside the window. Only the sounds of ragged breathing cut through the darkness as Xiao Qiye kissed Shen Zichuan again and again. He didn't want to surrender, but he had already lost. Well, by the way, this is the art that I saw, like, I was flipping to the back of the book for the character guide, and of course, I saw this, and of course I was like, well, I know what happens at literally the very end of the book. Thank you for putting the art at the very end of the book. It's, like, impossible to not see that. But, you know, I'm not gonna complain about the art being there, existing. Yeah. Yeah, oh my god, wait, his hand. His hand. That's Shen Zichuan has his hand on Xiao Qiye's head. It's like holding his hair. I didn't even notice that at first. Well, it's, yeah. Well. No, right, that chapter is barely a chapter. It's very short, and the fact that it's part 1, I'm like, okay, what happens in part 2? We'll find out next week. But, I know we went late, but, like, can we just, like, for a minute, I just need to talk about what we just read. I don't even know. I'm just, I've been going through and rereading, like, as much as I can after each reading that we do live, because there's so much information that I don't grasp at first, but that's not a bad thing in any way. It's just like the politics are really dense, but it's been so rewarding because things like start to piece together and you're just like, wait a minute, like how did she do that? And you're not, occasionally you're like, wait a minute, what just happened? And it doesn't really, like, the narrative doesn't really tell you at all, for sure. Or it just waits, like Tang Jiuqing just waits, like, several chapters to tell you, like, to verify something that you were like, well, maybe this is going on politically, I don't know. I really like that, even though it, like, also drives me nuts because I'm very ADHD and I have trouble, like, just following all the threads of what's going on, but that's why I've been, like, rereading it, and that's helped a lot. But, like, the writing is so good, the translation is so good. I can't imagine trying to read this, in, you know, even, like, an okay translation of this, I feel like you would miss so much. This one is just so good. Like, everything is so clear. It's so cinematic. I can't. I can't believe. That is also, oh yeah, and Henry, what you said, that's also an excellent line to end the volume. Like, the chapter before ended, and I was like, that could have ended the volume. But this did, and but he had already lost. That's a very good ending to Volume 1. Henry, I would like to be good enough to actually read an actual novel in Mandarin. I don't know when I will have the time to get that good, but that is like a dream goal. And there are so many books that I want to go back and like read certain lines in the original and just try to like to understand the sound of it and the meaning of it in Chinese, and then to be able to see like how they translated it is like really interesting to me, because I'm sure that no matter how good the translation is, there are certain things that get like lost that you just can't really convey, and that like in a translation that always is like in the back of my head, like, oh, I wonder what this was like, for people to read it in the original. Yeah, I said this before, but when we started this series in this book, I was like overwhelmed, and I was like, how will I be able to get into this, because there's so much information, and it was just a lot. But I'm completely obsessed. Like after maybe the first stream or something, I feel like I just became completely obsessed, and I'm like, I get it now. I totally get it. Um, but yeah. So thank y'all for joining me for this today. Like, what a crazy end to the volume. And we don't have to wait long, thankfully, to get into volume 2 and find out what happens next. Because next week, on Monday, I will be reading volume 2. I will be starting volume 2. So we're gonna get right back into it. Um, oh my god, Blue, Tong Jo Ching does drop you into the sinkhole and lets you climb out. Literally, we were dropped into the sinkhole. The literal sinkhole that exists. But then they hold your hand for a bit until you get used to the world. Yeah, like, it's not so difficult and so ambiguous. Like, because if it was a little more ambiguous, it would be like really frustrating to read. But there's like enough there to get you through it. Um, the handhold is Ding Tao with his little notebook. He's like taking notes, and he's like, "Hey, I'm gonna give you some hints. I'll tell you what's going on. I know everything that's ever happened." I that's he's such a random character. Like, that's gonna be my favorite side character now. Just the guy spying on people with his notebook on the roof. I love that. Um, so yeah. Um, there are so many names. And you know what? Even though I have found the guide in the back very helpful with the names and what people do and where they're from and whatnot, there are like even more characters that I know are like not quite as important, or there's various reasons they couldn't be in the guide. Sometimes it like might have been a spoiler, and sometimes it was just like, oh, there's too many people. But I was like wishing there were even more people in the guide than there are, because there's so many characters. It's so overwhelming. Um, I love how everything was totally realistic. And I don't know if they've mentioned Qinggong. Well, we had a footnote about what Qinggong means today, which means they haven't mentioned Qinggong in the book before today's stream, which is wild, because literally it took until today's stream to be like, oh, by the way, these guys crossbreed horses and wolves, and also there's Qinggong. Everything else has been so, like 100% kind of like grounded in reality that it was like, oh, okay. We can like break the rules a little bit, and also maybe like, I, I guess there's like there's a real, I guess it depends on like how how intense is the qigong, because there's qigong where people are just flying through the air, and then I guess there's qigong where you're like a really good jumper. I guess we don't know like how over the top it is, but still, um, yeah, they haven't gotten that much into the martial arts, I guess. I'll be curious, like, but at the same time, the fighting scenes are so clear, which I love. Um, yeah. I need to go, but thank y'all so much for joining me. I will see you on Monday for starting volume 2. Please have a good rest of your week and have a good weekend. I'll see you then. Bye.